I'm joined on set now by Liberal MP Craig Kelly. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
Yeah, good. Great to be here, Chris.
Have you still got that Energy Committee position that you used to have in the last
we've changed it around a little bit this Parliament. The last Parliament, every minister had his separate backbench committee. This time I think it's I think it's a good idea. We actually combined several of the ministries together. So the Energy Committee is with, I think it's Northern Australia, Resources and a few others. So it's a good idea. It means that more of us can get to more of the backbench committees. So,
yeah, so even though you're a backbencher, you still have a role in energy policy in the Parliament. So it's a special interest of yours and that'll continue?
It is. Look, I can see that energy is just so important to this nation. If we don't have low-cost energy, which used to be one of our nation's competitive advantages, it was why we're a rich and prosperous nation. It's not through sort of good luck or we think we just legislate our way to be rich and prosperous. It's the fact that we had that black coal seam that ran down our eastern seaboard, that we've got the gas, that we've got the uranium, all those things we've got go into making us the great country we are. And if we surrender our coal-fired power stations and think we can run our economy on importing solar panels from China and wind turbines from China, we're going to drive this economy down and damage the prosperity of Australians.
So I want to get your thoughts on former Greens leader Bob Brown. I don't know if you saw the start of my program, but I went through this bloke. He's campaigned all his life against nuclear energy. He's campaigned against hydroelectricity dams. He's protested against coal mining. He's protested against gas facilities. And now he's protesting against, of all things, wind turbines.
Well, there's a bit of concern. I know Bob Brown is being struck some coalition medal for his efforts during the election campaign. His convoy up to northern Queensland turned so many votes, so he's held in special hearts in the coalition, this coalition parliament, for the work that he did there. Therefore, we're a bit concerned about what Bob does, and we're a bit worried about it, but it just shows the hypocrisy of these people. They're just against everything. But then when you do look at it, he does have finally a point that these wind turbines being built in Tasmania are going to be like everywhere else we've seen in the world, will push electricity prices further north. The more intermittent generation you put in, irrespective of the cost of generating that electricity, when you force intermittent generation into an electricity grid, electricity goes higher. That's been the experience everywhere in the world and including here in Australia.
There's no doubt he makes some reasonable points about the wind turbines, but these are the points he's argued against in the past, so the killing of birds and the like. And to talk about all the area they take up and the visual impact of them. I was in Malaysia a week or so ago and saw kilometres of jungle that had been felled to put in solar panels. And I'm thinking, I wonder what the CO2 balance worked out there, because they got rid of all the jungle that was turning CO2 into oxygen, and they've levelled it to put in solar panels.
If you look at the figures from the International Energy Agency, wind and solar together makes up today about 1% of total world energy supplies. And even if we do all this trillions of dollars of investment in wind and solar, we get to 2040 on the International Energy Agency figures, we're going to have maybe 4% of the world's electricity generated by wind and solar. So it's just the idea that we can change the climate by building wind turbines is just a complete nonsense, and we have to call it out.
So tell me what you think about the man who will be our next head of state in this country, the first in line to the British throne, Prince Charles, who's out there saying we've got 18 months to do something. I don't know what he says, but he reckons we've got 18 months to take some drastic action or the planet will be doomed.
Remember, 120 months ago, Prince Charles said we had 96 months left. So we're now 2 years past when the world was meant to end, according to Prince Charles. So now he appears to give us a reprieve of 18 months. Look, it just...
it's ludicrous, right? So how are you concerned that this bloke's going to be our our head of state?
Well, it just shows how the structure of the monarchy. You can even have a complete, someone like Prince Charles there, and it's the structure that does the best format. So you should say, long live the Queen.
Long live the Queen, all right. But I mean, this is a serious question for this country. We like to try and think that the head of state is not involved in politics. That's one of the reasons people are so resistant to the idea of a republic. They fear that you'll get someone in the head of state position who puts political positions. This guy will be the next monarch, and he's already making ill-informed, inflammatory, alarmist comments on perhaps the biggest political issue of our time.
Well, you're right, Chris. They are ill-informed and they are alarmist. And the statements are a complete nonsense. And he's contradicting what he said before when he made similar statements, as I said, 10 years ago.
So is he fit enough to be our head of state?
Chris, I'll be honest, it is a concern. It is from someone that is a monarchist and thinks that our monarchy is important, that we retain it, and I can't see the reason for change. There is a concern about Prince Charles.
So what should happen here? Should the Queen ring him, a grown man, and say, look, son, shut up?
Well, I think she has over a number of years, and that's why the Queen remains being the Queen, and let's hope she stays healthy for many years to come.
You reckon she's staying in long in the job because she doesn't trust son number one?
Possibly.
All right, now let's get to something here that you and I publicly disagree on. You've called the so-called voice, the idea of a voice to Parliament under Indigenous recognition, a third chamber. Are you prepared to say that that is inflammatory language, that there's no such proposition to create a third chamber?
Okay, I'll just clarify exactly. I agree with the position of Malcolm Turnbull, the former Prime Minister, and the former Attorney General George Brandis. Now, what they actually said, they said it's this important distinction. They said it will seem to be a third chamber. They're not saying it will be a third chamber that will have an official veto, that laws don't get passed by the Governor-General unless they're signed off by this voice to Parliament. But they're saying in practice it will be a de facto chamber, it will seem to be a third chamber because it is enshrined in the Constitution. Everyone in Australian society today already has a voice to Parliament. Any group can get together, a number of people can get together and form a bit of a lobbying group and be a voice to Parliament. So that voice to Parliament already exists. As soon as you take that and you enshrine it in the Constitution, you create the potential that it becomes a de facto or seen as a third chamber.
But you know that the Parliament, the government, has a wide range of advisory bodies on pharmaceuticals, on foreign affairs, on all sorts of issues. Surely you agree that there should always be some sort of Indigenous advisory body to advise the government on issues related to Indigenous affairs?
Well, that should be up to those individual groups to decide, like it is any other advisory group. Any group in Australia is free to do that.
No, the government actually has specially formulated advisory bodies. Now, they already have informal ones on Indigenous affairs, so why not formalise it? How could any problem be created if the government formalised a representative body that would have non-binding advice to give to government on issues relating to Indigenous affairs?
If you do it via legislation, happy for the debate to come. My concern is if you do it under the Constitution. You have to remember what the purpose of our Australian Constitution actually is for. It's not to set up different groups or a statement of our history or recognising what happened during the First or Second World War. Australian Constitution is there to set up how we govern ourselves.
Yeah, but this whole proposal is designed to resist big changes to the Constitution, and all the proposal would say, I mean, at the moment it says the federal government has responsibility for Indigenous affairs. It would keep that and add a clause suggesting, and they would take advice from a representative body. And then you would legislate to formulate that body any way you see fit. And if you don't like the way it's going, a government could change that.
As soon as you enshrine it in the Constitution, you put it on a different footing.
Yeah,
at the moment, all these groups exist, and they are free to exist. And the great thing about our Constitution is that it inherently gives those groups those freedoms to form those voices to Parliament.
But there's no way known anyone is proposing a third chamber, and there's no way known in this country anyone would allow a body to act as a third chamber.
Well, this is why, Chris.
Why we shouldn't use the term third chamber, right?
The term is only being used. No one is saying, or no one I know is saying, it is going to be a third chamber where the Governor-General won't pass laws unless it's signed off by that third chamber.
Can we park it then?
They're saying it's seen or being a de facto, and there's a big difference.
Yeah, right, but can we park the term then? Can we kiss goodbye to the term third chamber? Not productive, not useful, misleading, don't use it in the debate?
Well, I think you have to say, what is this third chamber? Or I won't say.
Go again.
What is this? Okay, what is this group? What happens if this group says something they are against a particular piece of legislation? Where does that put that piece of legislation? Now, at the moment, these things already exist. I don't see what you're achieving by taking what is an informal arrangement that every Australian has and enshrining it in the Constitution.
We are out of time. I've got to get on to another interview, but we'll keep discussing this issue in the weeks to come.
It's important to keep the debate going.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.